Okay, so today is Thursday, October 5th, 2023. It's the Stronghold Digital Mining Daily Update. My name's Steven Zeiner. This is going to be a fairly short update, but it's kind of an important and somewhat exciting update. There is potentially a huge catalyst for the price of Bitcoin that may materialize by next Friday, October the 13th. So hear me out. I was thinking today, hey, the GBTC lawsuit, that litigation, right, that was taking place between the, I believe, Grayscale investment, the Grayscale Bitcoin Investment Trust and the SEC, I believe a court of appeals on Tuesday, August 29th, basically ruled essentially in Grayscale's favor. So typically, there's a 45-day window in which either party can appeal the ruling. Now, there's no reason to believe that GBTC would want to appeal this very favorable ruling. There is, on the other hand, a potential argument to be made that maybe the SEC would want to appeal this straight to the Supreme Court. Now, when we hear and we think about Supreme Court cases and we think about all the very meaningful and huge and consequential decisions that the United States Supreme Court, right, the highest court in the land, right, the decisions this court has historically made, I don't know that an issue involving whether or not in the land of the free, people can invest in a spot Bitcoin ETF. That doesn't necessarily, in my mind, rise to that, sort of like monumental occasion, right, of appearing before the justices of the Supreme Court. You think, boy, this has got to be a really big issue, like life or death, like hugely consequential for, justice or for the well-being of people. You just think of these really hugely impactful cases that appear before the US Supreme Court. I don't know that the United States Securities and Exchange Commission saying, hey, we disagree with this lower court's ruling that we acted arbitrarily and capriciously when rejecting, Grayscale's application to convert into a Bitcoin spot ETF. I mean, that sounds almost trivial because what's at stake ultimately isn't really life or death. As far as I can tell, this is, hey, it's more a question of whether or not a particular governmental agency believes that investors, right, individuals, would be subjected to a harm so great, a harm so lethal that even, hey, there can be no approval whatsoever of a spot Bitcoin ETF, despite the fact this same governmental agency in, I believe, 2021, decided that it would be perfectly acceptable for investors to, I guess, speculate in I believe, a Bitcoin futures ETF, if I'm getting that right. So I don't know what's going to happen, but something has to happen one way or the other by, I believe, Friday, October 13th, 2023. Not tomorrow, but rather next Friday. So if the governmental agency in question, which is the United States Securities and Exchange Commission, which I've said before, and I really do mean this. I mean, the agency does tremendous work attempting to root out bad actors and to protect the public. Look, there's no doubt about that. As to whether or not after, what are now years of study and sort of like deliberation, right, as to whether or not it's appropriate or not to allow people to have access to a US-based spot Bitcoin ETF. I mean, I think most people, right, that, a lot of people are in favor of it. I don't see, 100,000 people marching on, Washington, D.C. saying, no, we do not want a spot Bitcoin ETF. I don't see major American cities being, burned down, so to speak, because people are so outraged by the potential, for there to be a spot Bitcoin ETF, right? I don't see that. I'm not even sure who's objecting to this other than the SEC. by contrast, I see a lot of very sober voices. I mean, incredibly sober voices, responsible voices, educated voices, you know, saying, hey, the time has come for the United States of America to have a spot Bitcoin ETF. Maybe not just one, but several. So if the agency chooses not to appeal the decision which was reached on, I believe, Tuesday, August 29th, then it'll be up to the court, right, to decide, hey, what's going to happen next? And I mean, the court could plausibly say, hey, you've got to approve Grayscale's application to become a, spot Bitcoin ETF. I mean, I don't know how likely that is, but certainly it's going to, I think, bring this to the forefront. There has to be a yay or a nay. Maybe the agency is going to come up with some other rationale, some other reason to deny Grayscale's application. But if to the extent a court has already adjudicated that, hey, the SEC acted, and these are not my words, these are the court's words, if I read this correctly, that the agency acted in an arbitrary and capricious manner. In my neck of the woods, they might call that, just making up a bunch of SHIT, well, if you come up with a bunch of other reasons that you're saying, hey, well, okay, fine. If the reasons we initially came up with aren't good enough, well, let's come up with some other reasons. Well, it's going to sound like a bunch of SHIT even more so, right? Listen, SEC, you do incredible work. You really do. And I think that the work you do is often thankless. I think this is a moment, though, where the overwhelming majority of the people have spoken. The American public wants, the American investing public wants a spot Bitcoin ETF. Some of the largest financial institutions in the United States of America have stepped up with spot Bitcoin ETF applications. They're prepared to do a responsible job of managing and operating a spot Bitcoin ETF. I do not know of any group, any constituency, really any sector of the American public. I just can't honestly think of anyone really who is adamantly opposed to a spot Bitcoin ETF being accessible to investors in the United States of America. So, with all of that said, this has the potential to be a huge catalyst for the price of Bitcoin. Has the potential, not the guarantee. So, if we don't hear anything, if there's no news, which may ultimately be good news, right? Grayscale's not going to appeal the decision. If the SEC chooses not to appeal the decision, then this has an opportunity to move forward. The SEC may very well decide, you know what, let's just go ahead and approve the Grayscale conversion from a investment trust, for lack of a better way to describe it, into a spot Bitcoin ETF. And at the same time, or very soon thereafter, let's just go ahead and approve all of these pending spot Bitcoin ETF applications by the likes of BlackRock, Fidelity, and many others. I mean, some of the largest, asset management companies in the land. Highly, highly respected, responsible institutions. I think the time has come, but we shall see. But it is potentially a huge, huge catalyst for the price of Bitcoin. And how does that affect Stronghold Digital Mining? Well, all things remaining the same, right? If the network hash rate, the Bitcoin network hash rate remains more or less the same, but you see suddenly, hey, it looks like we're going to be getting a spot Bitcoin ETF. The price of Bitcoin is invariably likely going to go up. Maybe it goes up to 35,000, 40,000 in the short term, maybe higher after that. Again, no one knows for sure, but shares of Stronghold Digital Mining are highly correlated to the price of Bitcoin. I mean, you've noticed this too, right? When Bitcoin kind of bounces up, shares of not just Stronghold, but really every company in the Bitcoin, publicly traded Bitcoin mining ecosystem tend to go up as well. So that's just something to keep in mind as we end this week and approach next week. What I am anticipating, no guarantees, but what I'm anticipating is that we will potentially hear from Stronghold Digital Mining tomorrow, Friday, and we may very well hear what our September Bitcoin production numbers happen to be, and the potential always exists for some additional news as well. In our case, right, the next big thing that's kind of like on our radar is where are we going to place the 25 megawatts of end-to-end data center equipment that we already own. We just need a place to put it. And then we got to figure out how to fill it with Bitcoin mining machines. So until tomorrow, let's stay positive, let's be great, and we'll see each other then.